Our first lesson this morning, even though for me it's a familiar story, I was trying to look at it in a different way than I usually do. And I see this passage as a modern day political statement. Moses was willing to stand up to God in the burning bush and go to Pharaoh to lead God's people out of Egypt. I don't think I could have faced God and Pharaoh. I'm grateful there are people in this world who have the courage to stand up to what needs to change. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at the great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see God, called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Then the Lord said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the father of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to go to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites and Hittites, the Amorites and the Perizzites, the Hittites and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen the Egyptians oppress them. Now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I to go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? The Lord said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to him? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent you to me. Me to you, sorry about that. God also said to Moses, Thus shall say to the Israelites, the Lord of God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations. Go and assemble the elders of Israel to say to them, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have given heed to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. I declare that I will bring you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, and Perizzites, and Hivitites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. Our second lesson this morning, even though it's short, I read it a couple of times, and I wish we could see clearly a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night that leads us. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was nearer, for God thought, if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. The Lord went in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day and led them along the way in a pillar of fire by night, to give them light so that they might travel by day and night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people.
As I've thought about the elements in this series that we're looking at, the classic four elements, and we're adding a fifth, flora and fauna. When I thought about the classic four elements, I thought, okay, the earth can quake, volcanoes can spew lava, waters can flood or disappear, leaving us in drought. Air can blow over trees. When I lived up in Washington, spent 10 years in a place where we had a power outage that lasted over a week because of wind. Took down so many trees that so many lines came down that it took a week for power to be restored where I lived. And when I was growing up, the John Hancock Tower in Boston had windows popping out of the tower because of the wind. Powerful stuff, and yet, for me at least, fire feels in my psyche like the most powerful of the elements. Fire can be destructive for sure, and fire feels powerful because of that destructive power. Fire can also be constructive, and I see power in that too. When I was growing up, summer lasted until Labor Day because 2 days after Labor Day, school began. And that was the end of summer. Though it was years ago, I remember, not back to my childhood, I'm only going back, like 10 years. But I remember, I have a vivid memory of taking some vacation, going back east. It was the middle of August. I spent 2 lovely weeks in New Hampshire at the family cottage. And then it came to Labor Day weekend, and it was like somebody flipped a switch, and summer was over. Sunday night, Monday morning at 3 a.m., I woke up because I was so cold. I was so cold I didn't matter how many blankets I put on top of myself, I could not fall back asleep. I knew the only way to warm up was to build a fire in the wood-burning stove. And so I got up in my PJs and put on my shoes and a jacket and went out to the wood pile to get some wood to bring in. And I got a fire going in the wood-burning stove, and I flattened out the futon sofa and grabbed my bedding from the room that we still call the bunk room, even though it's been decades since it had bunk beds in it. and made myself a little nest on the futon and was able to get back to sleep. Summer had ended. Now, I don't think I would have frozen to death that night, but man, did fire make a difference and bring me comfort and allowed me to get to sleep. Ever since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we have been burning stuff to make power. We were burning biomass, trees, peat, that kind of stuff. Long time. But at the Industrial Revolution, we started burning fossil fuels. It started out with coal, burning coal to make energy, among other things, to run pumps so that we could mine coal to burn, to run pumps so we could mine coal, but the coal got used for other things as well, including engines and coal, steam engines allowed us to move mills away from the edge of rivers. We had used the power of the water flowing past to run mills. We were able to move them away with the generation of power and the generation of electricity, to coal to boil water to make steam, to turn turbines to generate electricity. And then we started using oil and fossil gas to generate electricity. The four-stroke internal combustion engine was created actually in 1875. It took a while for it to really catch on. But about the same time that we started using fossil fuels to generate electricity, the thing that made internal combustion engines so wonderful was the combination of power and ease of operation. And that's all because the amount of energy that is packed into gasoline, especially compared to its volume and mass. Steam-powered tractors had already existed for a while, but internal combustion engines meant that tractors could remain powerful while being easier to operate. This meant that farmers could get more work done in the same amount of time, which allowed them to grow more food more easily. And as a result, that meant that food costs went down in developed nations, and the abundance of food meant that countries could easily export their food to other countries where the demand was high, and powerful, efficient engines made transporting that food to other countries possible. Fire is powerful and transformative. Is it any wonder that when he saw the bush ablaze and not being consumed, that Moses said, I think I'm going to check that out? Adam White points out that when God calls Moses in the wilderness, Moses is alone. He is out in the fields living off the land. Moses would have needed fire for survival as a wilderness shepherd. He would have been acquainted with the risks of brush fires. He would have been on the lookout for wildfire for the sake of his own well-being, as well as for the flock entrusted to his care. And when God calls, God does so out of fire. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. White calls the burning bush a divine ploy to get Moses' attention. And once God gets Moses' attention, God can give Moses his mission. I almost want to hear a theme song in 5. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, only God, Moses doesn't just take the mission. God has to have a discussion with, Moses has to have a discussion with God first. Moses has to have a little tete-a-tete. And so Moses starts talking to God, and I love how that keeps coming up in the Hebrew Scriptures. Abraham has to have a discussion with God a couple times during the Abraham saga. Jacob wrestles with God. Moses has this little exchange with God. Jonah runs away from God, gets really angry at God. All kinds of people bargain with God and negotiate with God and get little things out of the deal. And one of the things that Moses gets out of his discussion, his negotiations with God, is a name to call God. It's a bit of a cryptic name. 4 letters in Hebrew, 4 consonants in Hebrew, because Hebrew doesn't show the vowels. You're just supposed to know them, I guess. YHWH is how it's transliterated into English. It seems to be related to the verb to be. The New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition translates these 4 letters into I am who I am. I've heard some argue that I will be who I will be is perhaps a better translation, or certainly a equal translation. And if you noticed, if you're reading along as Val read the scripture, the Lord, the word Lord, had small capital letters next to it. And I am who I am was written with small capital letters on the screen. That's a clue that in the Hebrew, this is what it says. YHWH. That's why it's in those small caps. White says that this name gives Moses the sense that the gift of God's, White says that this gives White the sense that the gift of God's name to Moses bears some similarity to the story of Prometheus, Greek god who gifted humanity with fire. A risk is taken in the giving of a powerful gift. This gift can be used well or poorly. It can give life or it can destroy it. From the moment the fire gift of God's name is entrusted to Moses, there is a liability opened up, writes White. This God's name and presence may be used for warmth and light, life, and it may be used in vain to consume and destroy. I think there's wisdom in this insight, especially in what he says about using God's name in vain. You might remember that one of the 10 Commandments is to not use the Lord's name in vain. The true power of this commandment has been diminished by the assumption that using God's name in vain is to say things like, God damn. The truly vain use of God's name happens when we consume or destroy other people or creation like a wildfire and think we're doing it on behalf of God, that we're doing it in God's name. Fire signifies both presence and power. It sustains and consumes. In his new book, Here Comes the Sun, Bill McKibben claims fire defines us. He might be right. For something like 4.6 billion years, a great gaseous ball of fire some 93 million miles away has burned continuously, allowing life on Earth to evolve. Our planet is in the sweet spot of our solar system in what is literally called the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot if it were closer to the sun, and not too cold if it were further away. If we're too close, it would be so hot the water would evaporate from the atmosphere, and if it were too cold, it would freeze, and Earth would be a frozen wasteland. Early humans encountered wildfires set by lightning. They must have. At some point, those ancestors learned to control flames and eventually to produce it. And With that, it became possible to move away from the equator and to cast light deep into caves and to harden spear points and to burn off grasslands. Above all, it became possible to cook. Applying fire to food means that some of the process of digestion can be performed outside the body. This ability is reflected in our very form. That's why we have relatively small guts and teeth. Cooking made meat much easier to digest, giving us calorie-dense diets that supported the evolution of a much larger brain. Did you know that cooking is universal to our species? No explorer has ever encountered human beings who did not cook. Fire has made us who we are. And for the past 200 years or so, fire has been making it harder and harder to be who we are. The carbon we release, the carbon that had been carefully and safely sequestered underground that we dig up and pump out and burn, is being released into the atmosphere, raising the Earth's temperature and changing the very climate on which humans have built civilization. To quote Jane Ellen Nichol, we are so in love with burning things that we ignore the great fireball, the great ball of fire in the middle of our solar system. For millennia, all kinds of cultures worship the sun as a god, supreme in power, wisdom, and justice, making a daily pass across the sky to survey its kingdom. From Egypt and India to Mexico and Peru, sun religions honored the great orb's unsurpassed power that provided light and warmth and life itself. After 4.6 billion years, the sun's fire is undimmed, but we reject it, preferring the fire of our own making. But there is some good news. I got permission to share this trailer for a movie.
Every day I send you 1,000 times more power than you use in a year. It's up to you, fellows.
The sun is the most charismatic object in our material universe. Though you can't look at it directly, it's just stunning to think about what it means.
Tener unas placas que uno siente que pueda tener luz con esta problemática que hay en Puerto Rico de la luz. Ustedes no nos retiren las placas porque yo voy y busco una placa de esa y le doy por la cabeza.
You go out, you tell people, is climate change real? They say yes. Is solar a positive development helping us cut carbon emissions? Of course it is. Do you think it's a good idea that you can save 80-90% in your electric bill? Are you kidding?
We were paying out anywhere from around $200 to $250 a month in just electricity. But like the electricity bill came last month was $11.
We live in a really dark time. It's as dark a time as I ever remember. But there is this one light shining, literally, the light of the sun transmuted through these simple technologies that provide us with the energy that we need. That light's shining, and if we do our job, that light won't dim. It will just grow steadily stronger and stronger. That's our job now.
Think tank Ember. The electrotech revolution is the most profound transformation of the energy system since the shift from biomass fossil fuel to fossil fuels in the 18th century. As electrotech costs fall and exponential growth continues, a century of evolution is converging into a decade of revolution. That was good news in a report released this past week. But what the heck do they mean by electrotech? Well, what they're talking about is the technology-enhanced ways that the world generates, uses, and moves electrons. That is, they're talking about renewable electricity supplying from solar and wind, the electrical demand from electric vehicles and heat pumps, and the connections from batteries and digitization. 121 slides, you ready? I'm just going to show you 3 graphs. I did kind of geek out when I got into this report, but 3 slides that I think are fairly easy to understand. This first graph shows how costs for wind and solar energy have dropped over the last 10 years and how the costs of batteries have dropped over the past 10 years. In most places, solar electric generation, and wind is indirect solar energy, right? The sun heats up the atmosphere in some spots than others, and that causes winds to blow. So solar electric generation is competitive with or is less expensive than fossil fuel generated electricity. Meanwhile, battery costs have dropped as batteries have become more and more efficient. Second graph. This shows how from 2000 to today, solar has gone from the smallest single source of electricity generation in the world to the largest. 25 years. Think about that for a moment. Worldwide, solar energy generation can do more to meet our energy needs now than any other source of electricity. Third graph shows the surge in cumulative solar capacity installation globally year over year. You can't read the numbers very easily on that if you're in the sanctuary. Hopefully on Zoom you can read it more easily. But that top line that is like just way above the others is 2025, which is why it's only half of the graph. We haven't finished the year yet. But we are installing as much energy in the first half of the year, solar energy capacity, as was installed in all of 2023, just 2 years ago. On this pace, we will more than double the amount of solar being installed from just 2 years ago. That orb burning gas 93 million miles away can meet our energy needs. I know this about myself. One of the places where I find it easiest to sit in stillness and silence is at a campfire. Sometimes a fire in the fireplace. Maybe whether we consciously recognize it or not, the fire has something to say, and maybe in the depths of our being, we are eager to listen to what fire has to say. Once upon a time, it might have called a prophet to lead a people to freedom. Once upon a time, it might have helped the people find their way in the wilderness. Once upon a time, it might have helped us know who we are and made us who we are. Today, the campfire might be telling us to look to the sky, to a giant gaseous ball of fire that provides more than enough energy to the earth for all of us humans and all of the plants, all of the other animals. Maybe the campfire is telling us to get our power from a fire that burns in the sky. maybe that fire can burn in our souls. Amen.